योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। हरि ओम। So just before we begin, many of you know and we remember my aunt Geeta used to be here attending the sessions, sitting on a chair over there. So with her memory in the mind, I'll now continue. Since we are meeting after a long time, I think it's been 4 weeks, I'll do a quick recap of where we are and then we'll continue with the next sutra. So if you remember, in the first session, we gave an introduction to the text, how the Yoga Sutra and the Bhashya and the further commentaries are what's known as a Darshana text. Okay. Then we went into detail on what is a Sutra, what is a Bhashya, what is the definition of the two. And then we looked at how Guruji had a unique perspective on these things because he was not confined from a Darshana perspective and he could integrate a lot of other texts. And also he had his own unique observations which he was able to integrate. And the way he delineated it for all of us was as though it is to be written for a lay person, right? Not a technical expert in the field. So that was the introduction. Then we started through the sutras one by one. Now among the sutras, we could consider the first 4 as the first subsection. So Atha Yoga Anushasanam Yogaschitta Vritti Nirodha Tada Drashtu Swarupe Vasthanam Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. So these 4 sutras together sort of laid the groundwork. So they told us what is, so in the Vyasa in his commentary he told us what are the Chitta Bhumis, right? Kshipta, Mooda, Vikshipta, Ekagra, Niruddha. Then he said Yoga Samadhi. Okay, so yoga is Samadhi. Then we looked at how there are 2 kinds of yoga, Samprajñata yoga, Asamprajñata yoga. Then Yoga's Chitta Vritti Nirodha, we sort of went into detail of what is Chitta, okay, and how it is made up of the 3 gunas, Trigunatmakam Chittam, with Sattva, Raja and Tama. And how slowly if you remove the tamasic influence, if you reduce the Rajasic influence and the Sattva, then you get what you get is called Prasankhyana. So it is Viveka Khyati. And how the Purusha and the Chitta sort of work together as a coupled system. And so Viveka Khyati is what leads to Samprajñata Yoga. That also is to be, you have to do the Nirodha of that to get into the Asamprajñata state. And there's a nice analogy of Chitta being like a magnet, Ayaskanta Manikalpam, Sannidhi Matropakari, and then therefore being attracted to the Purusha, and they have a eternal relation with each other. Whereas the Purusha or the Chiti Shakti is Aparinamini Chiti Shakti, okay? So it never changes, right? So even though there is this influence, the Purusha is eternally the same. Right? The transformations are happening in the Chitta because of the influence of the Purusha. Then we looked at the 3rd sutra, Tada Drashtu Swarupe Vasthanam. So in the situation where the Nirodha has actually happened, we saw that all the vrittis are attenuated. Samskaras may still remain in the Chitta. In this state, it is Yatha Kaivalye. It is almost as though it is in Kaivalya. It is in that state. So that is what Vyasa said in the commentary to the 3rd sutra. And then Vritti Sarupyam Mitratra. There we saw a very beautiful quotation from an even more ancient source, which said Ekameva Darshanam Khyatireva Darshanam, which says that the knowledge imprint on the Chitta, right, that is the single darshana for the Chitta and the Purusha as a system combined. Right? And therefore, in a what is called a Vyuthana state, right, where we are active in this world, there is Vritti Sarupyam. So whatever the Vritti, that is how is the Purusha appears to be. Right? And that is the common darshanam for both the Chitta and the Purusha. So that, very briefly, of course we spent a lot of time understanding that, but very briefly that concluded the first subsection. Then Patanjali moves on to the topic of Vrittis, and we were in the midst of that topic. Right? So the fifth sutra says Vrittayaha Panchatayyaha Klishta Klishtaha, where we saw what is Vritti. Anaya Vartate iti Vrittihi. So in some sense it's the shape and form of the Chitta at any given time is the Vritti. Vrittis are fivefold, right? No more than that, right? And they can occur simultaneously, and they can be klishta or aklishta, which means in the journey of yoga it can be problematic or unproblematic. That is true for each of the vrittis. So it's not like one vritti is very helpful and the other is problematic. For each of the vrittis there is a problematic aspect and a non-problematic aspect. And the fivefold categorization of the vrittis is one way to understand the state of the chitta from the classification from the point of view of the jnana imprint of the chitta. Right? And we may have different ways to classify, but the vrittis is the jnana based classification, because that is the subject of interest for yoga. Right? You could classify it through the proportion of sattva raja tama, right, and all those things, but here if you classify based on the jnana imprint, then it is the fivefold vrittis that are the most relevant. Then of course we started looking at all the vrittis one by one. So first they are listed: Pramana, Viparyaya, Vikalpa, Nidra, Smritayaha. So those are the five vrittis. We looked at Pramana, which is loosely translated as valid knowledge, right? Where there is sufficient evidence for you to think that it is valid. So first we looked at Pramana. Again that is threefold: Pratyaksha, Anumana, Agama, Pramanani. So Pratyaksha is direct perception through the sensory mechanism right up to the chitta, right? So Indriya Pranalikaya. So that is Pratyaksha, and that is also Vishesha Avadharana Pradhana. So it gives the specific of the object, right? And not information about the general class of objects, because you are directly seeing it. Right? Anumana is more about reasoning, and we looked at the different modes of reasoning which has been looked at in detail. Agama is when Apta Purushaha, right? So somebody, the Moola Vakta, the real person who had the Pratyaksha or who had the Anumana, when he passes on that information linguistically through the means of words, the person who hears those words, the vritti that happens in his mind is Agama. Right? So it has been very carefully defined what Agama is. Viparyayo mithya jnanam matadrupa pratishtam. Right? So Viparyaya is contrary knowledge which gets nullified the moment pramana comes. Right? So pramanena badate. And we saw some examples of Viparyaya which looked like rope as a snake and so on, which looked like an oddity. But then we realized that in some sense, or really speaking, we are always in Viparyaya because there is avidya. And avidya is there throughout unless we get Viveka Khyati. And therefore Viparyaya is sort of our constant companion. The next one we saw was Vikalpa. Shabda Jnananupati Vastu Shunyo Vikalpaha, which is a very interesting and nuanced vritti, which is neither Pramana nor Viparyaya, right? And which sort of captures the conscious structured thought. Right? So something that has been expressed through words and language, linguistically expressed, but it does not, the reality is not as is described exactly. Right? So Vastu Shunyo. But it could still be a very useful abstraction to lead our thought. Right? So that is Vikalpa. And there was a very beautiful example by Vyasa, which is Chaitanyam Purushasya Swarupam. Okay? So Chaitanya, consciousness, is the own form of Purusha. Right? And we saw why that is Vikalpa. It might seem completely correct, but still it is Vikalpa because Chitireva Purusha. The consciousness itself is Purusha. So when you say Chaitanya is somebody's form, what are those two things? There aren't two things. It's not like an object and an attribute, and therefore it is Vikalpa. Right? So it is a very nuanced and sort of subtle classification where the Viparyaya Vritti. And sort of the last one we saw in the previous session was Nidra, Abhava Pratyaya Lambana Vrittir Nidra. So the Vritti, that is the support of Abhava Pratyaya. Right? So the lack of any knowledge imprint and the cause of that. When that is the support of the Vritti, that is Nidra. So and like he also explained in detail why Nidra is not simply sleep. Any state where there is the knowledge imprint is not there, Abhava Pratyaya, that Vritti is Nidra. And we saw how Nidra is important. In each case we looked at some other texts like Upanishads and Vakyapadeya and so on, and sort of built the whole picture around that. So that is where we stand right now. We are in the middle of the subsection of Vrittis, and we are to start with Smriti.
Now we'll be embarking upon a very, very interesting topic called Smriti. Smriti is not just memory. It is rendered into English as memory. It's a very interesting concept in philosophical system. Memory is not just subject matter of neurology and psychology. You see, memory and imaginations are kind of fillers in mental acts. When we feel that there is no seemingly any mental act, that's not true. Memory will come as a filler, or imagination will come as filler. So they leave no gap between mental modulations. And we have this saying that idle mind is a devil's workshop. There is nothing like idle mind. This is because Darshana tells about realities. Otherwise we believe that yes, there is an empty state of mind. And then that is devil's workshop. Again, understand that if it's a devil's workshop, some activity is going on. Oh, where is the activity going on? If it is an empty mind, is the activity going on in the hands and arms and legs and motor organs? Where is it going on? Is it not in the mind itself? So devil's workshop means again a mental activity. So there is no case for cessation of mental activity. During the lifetime, between our transmigration from death to next life, it is an incessant activity vritti. And smriti, along with imagination, is the filler. So, I would first suggest you do not just go on using the word memory here. Memory has a very limited scope. Memory has a very limited connotation. We must stick to technical word smriti as students of yoga and not refer to this as memory. Memory and recollection are limited functions of chitta. But let us stick to the word smriti. Now, we say that life is subsumed by pains and pleasures of smaller magnitude or higher magnitude, significant or insignificant. Pain and pleasure is always accompanying us. Now you might say that you are without any pain and without pleasure as well. You can have a state that will say, no, there is no really pain or pleasure in me now. But the fact of the matter is there is something called as twilight condition. You cannot be having a any moment in life which is neither painful, neither pleasurable, if you take a microscope to vritti, you will always find that there is some pleasure or pain, maybe not significant magnitude that you can designate it as a pain or pleasure. Now, when you don't have actual pleasure, you still can have pleasure out of memory. The smriti will give you, if you don't have any actual pleasure, smriti can give you pleasure. When you don't have actual pain, smriti can give you pain. Do you follow? Again, of any magnitude, it could be significant or microscopic or macroscopic. But that's the role of the smriti. If you don't have pain and pleasure, you will have pain and pleasure. Where there is no actual pleasure, there can be smriti pleasure. When there is no actual pain, there can be smriti pain. Or imagination pain, imaginary pleasure. So human beings are endowed with this. Smriti and the kalpana, imagination, where they come as a fillers of the mind. Whenever you feel that your mind is empty, it's not really empty, take a microscope, look at it, there will be either imagination or there will be smriti. So smriti can give you pain and pleasure. When there is no actual physical pain and pleasure, sensory pain and pleasure, smriti can give you. Smriti is a means of knowledge, and smriti is also instrument of tormentation. See, the students' clan, none of you are now school-going and college-going students, but if there is one, you know that smriti or memory is very important thing. On the other hand, we are tormented by memory and we feel if we don't have the memory, it would have been better. We are agonized, harassed, tormented by memory, and we feel memory is a curse. Whereas a seeker of knowledge, for him, memory is boon and memory is bounty. Smriti is bounty and smriti is also baneful, is also curse. Now we think the memory, smriti, is only in the realm of mind. Being a student of philosophy, at some point in time you will realize it is not just in the realm of mind, even it is in the realm of the body. What is it? Our body is programmed. Whatever you eat, whether good food or nasty food, it becomes you. So body has a memory of you, and whatever you intake, the body will transform it into you. You eat banana, body will make banana you. You eat a mango, body will make the mango you. You drink water, the body will make water you. You eat tea, coffee, juices, whatever, the body will make it you. The body has also memory. Then again, memory, smriti rather. Now I can say that this person, suppose I am 50, 60, 70 years older than him. I say, I can see your grandmother sitting on your nose. Your grandfather is in your eyes. How did the body get it? You are not perhaps seen your grandfather and grandmother, or you don't remember your grandfather or grandmother, or you have not seen grandfather, grandmother. Your body part will have the memory. And then elder people tell you, you look like your uncle, you resemble with your grandfather, grandmother, etc. The body also has smriti. You don't have your smriti. That's why this is not just memory. Because you don't remember perhaps your great-grandfather. But body remembers your great-grandfather. Somebody will tell you. Some older people in your house will tell you. Body has memory. Smriti. The smriti is totally subsuming us. Imagine the smriti software totally removed from your mind. What is your fate? You don't remember who you are. You don't remember where you are. Imagine the state of mind. Because usually when we are tormented with smriti, we feel it's a curse to have smriti. It creates a hell of a problem for us. But that's not the case. Without smriti, it will be a greater problem. So smriti management is an aspect that becomes paramount. And yoga, psychology, works with smriti management. You should remember what you should remember. You should not remember what you should not remember. You should forget what you should forget. Again, your concept of photographic memory. There is nothing like photographic memory. In that case, you will not forget anything that has happened in your life. This will be a big problem. Is that right? The photography will catch that whatever is in its focal point. It will not say, I will not take this, I will not take that, I will only take this. But in our life, that's not the case. So many things are happening around you, so many things don't reach you at all. They don't go into memory impression cortex. If they all go into impression cortex, it's a big problem. Life is a big problem. So memory must be considered in psychological plane, mental plane, physical plane, transcendent plane. It's an enormous topic that we are embarking upon. But let me not bombard much more on you here about memory. It's a Darshana Shastra. It is going to tell us about realities, not about just the facts. So, this should be a revelation for you that smriti is a filler. And no moment of your life, no moment in your mind is bereft of smriti. Smriti is totally subsuming. And secondly, smriti has come as the last vritti. Because in one realm, the smriti is dependent on pramana, viparyaya, vikalpa, nidra. What do you remember? You remember whatever mental modulation you had by way of pramana, viparya, vikalpa and nidra. Oh, pramana may not be there for a while, smriti will be there. Viparya may not be there, smriti will be there. So it is all permeating, subsuming vritti within us. And therefore there is nothing like idle state of mind. Idle state of mind merely means the mind is not doing what it should do, the mind is doing what it should not be doing, and that's why we call it idle mind. In fact, there is nothing like vacuum in mind at all, because it is permeated and subsumed by smriti, along with also the kalpana, which comes in vikalpa. It's a kind of vikalpa, imagination. So these are bounties if you know how to use. Imagination and memory can be a problem if you don't have management. And yoga psychology tells you about vritti management, how to manage them so that you will mitigate the curse aspect of it and you will escalate the bounty aspect it. That is enough for the time being. Okay.
So let's look at the sutra. This sutra number 11. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. So Anubhuta Vishaya Sampramoshah Smritihi. Okay. So whatever he said has been very concisely defined. Okay. So that the essential parts that define it are there, and the rest is not there. So let's, as usual, let's look at the terms. Right? Anubhuta Vishaya Sampramoshaha. So Anubhutaha Vishayaha Tesham Asampramoshaha. So that is Anubhuta Vishaya Sampramoshaha. Means, so Anubhuta Vishaya. So Anubhuta means experienced. Okay. So Vishaya means object. So Vishaya means it's Indriyarthaha. Any object of perception or object of cognition, like the pot, a bench or whatever, those are objects. So experienced objects, Anubhuta Vishayaha, Asampramoshaha. Sampramosha or Mosha means being carried away, being stolen, going away, getting destroyed, getting lost, and so on. Asampramosha means not being lost, not being carried away, right? Not getting destroyed. What? The Anubhuta Vishayas, right? The experienced objects, they are not getting carried away or lost. That is Smriti. Right? That is how Smriti has been defined by Patanjali. Now, Vyasa takes this, and let's look at how sort of subtly and rigorously he'll dissect and analyze the mechanism of Smriti, okay, and what it contains, what it does not contain. So Vyasa starts by asking a question. He says, Kim pratyayasya chittam smarati ahosvid vishayasya iti. Means he is asking, the chitta, when it remembers, when there is smriti, is it the smaranam or the remembrance of the pratyaya, which means the knowledge imprint on the chitta that happened, which means roughly the process of the experience and the knowledge, the process of knowledge. Is that remembered, or is the vishaya, is the object remembered? Right? So this is how he starts with the analysis of what is the content of the smriti. Then he says, what happened in the first place? Right? Grahyoparaktaha pratyayaha, okay, which means the knowledge imprint was colored, uparaktaha, by the grahya, by the object. Right? So whatever was cognized, by that the chitta was influenced. Right? So grahyoparaktaha pratyayaha. That pratyaya is the knowledge imprint on the chitta. Actually, when I say on the chitta, it's almost as though chitta is taking that form. Okay, so it's not like a plain paper on which there is an imprint coming in. Grahya grahano ubhayakara nirbhasaha. Okay, so what happens to the chitta is a combination of the grahya, the object being cognized, and the grahana, the process of cognition. So the process of cognition is influencing or tainting the object being cognized. Okay. And together they come onto the chitta, and tatha jatiyakam samskaram arabate. Okay. So that combination that happened on the chitta starts that samskara residue in the chitta. Okay. We looked in a previous sutra when we said vrittaya panchataya klishta klishtaha, we said vritti samskaram chakram anishama vartate, means the wheel of vritti samskara, vritti generating the samskara, samskara generating the vritti, again generating the, so that wheel goes on forever. Okay. So here what Vyasa is saying, that when the cognition first happened, it was a combination of the object, the reality, and the process of knowledge through the chitta, and the two were combined, and the samskara that gets generated has an imprint of both of these. Okay, so that is the samskara. Saha samskaraha savyanjaka anjanaha. So that samskara will get triggered when its cause takes place. Right? So the samskaras are sort of residues lying in the chitta, and that gets triggered to generate the vritti when the conditions are right. Okay, when its conditions are right. Tadakaram eva. So the samskara, when it manifests, right, it's grahya grahano ubhayatmika. So the samskara, when it generates the vritti, it has a combination of both the imprint of the process of knowledge at the time and the external object, because both happened together when the first time the imprint happened in the chitta. Okay? And that smriti janayati. Okay? So that samskara is generating this smriti. So the thing to bear in mind is that smriti has a combination of the process of knowledge of the object and the object itself. Okay? Now Vyasa is being very careful here. He says, Tatra grahanakara purva buddhi grahyakara purva smriti. So when that samskara generated the smriti, the component of this, which is predominantly about the process of knowledge at the original time, that is to be called buddhi. Okay? And the component which is primarily about the grahya, the object, that is to be called smriti. So the entire recollection is not smriti. Okay? The component which is about the object, that is the smriti. And I think, see, the one way to understand this is when you first saw an object, when you said, I am ghataha, this is a pot. Okay? So the imprint of the pot as an object of thought happened in the chitta. Okay? At the same time, there was the experience, right? There was the process of knowledge. So you experienced looking at the pot, and then the pot itself. Both of them were in the chitta. When the samskara generates this again as part of smriti, both of these come back, right? So the pot is coming back again as a topic of the thought. Right? Initially also the pot was I'm avoiding the word object of thought because I'm using the object also to refer to the pot, right? So let's say topic. So the pot initially was also the topic of the thought when you first saw it. On recollection also it is the topic of the thought, and therefore that is smriti, it is being recollected. But when you first saw the object, the seeing itself was not the topic of the thought. That was directly being experienced. Right? When the samskara is generating again, it is for the first time that it is manifesting as the topic of the thought. So this is not something that is happening again in the chitta. The previous seeing coming as the topic or the content of the thought is happening for the first time. So that particular pratyaya is not being repeated. It's happening for the very first time, and therefore that is buddhi. So Vyasa takes it aside and says that is buddhi. And the pot aspect, which was there as the object of the thought the first time, and again during memory it is the object, that part is the smriti. Right? And I'll refer to some other lines from the Yoga Sutra itself or some other texts which will clarify this. So therefore there are some things like smriti parishuddho, the cleaning of, the purifying of memory. So why? So the taint of the original knowledge process has probably colored the understanding of the object. Right? So in smriti parishuddho or smriti parishuddhi, that taint needs to be removed, and the pure knowledge, the yathartha jnanam of the object needs to come. And now we understand what that really means, because Vyasa has explained in detail how this process really worked. And he actually emphasizes on that, and therefore he removes that aspect. He says that is buddhi, and only the object dominant component of that memory generated by the samskara, the object dominant component, that is to be called the smriti.
You see, we all have a brain, and brain is not a problem for us all the time. But to understand the brain is always a problem. Is that right? If you decide to understand your brain, then it is quite a problematic proposition. Similarly is the case of memory. Having memory or not having memory is not as much as a problem, as much as understanding the memory itself is a problem. Now we confront it. When you heard about this, you understood it's a very terse subject matter. Having memory is not a problem, but understand what is memory is a big problem. And in philosophy, we try to face the problems and not avoid the problems. Here, I refer to photographic memory. It's not a proper kind of expression. Because photograph, when you have photograph, you put a date at the back of it, you write immediately the date. Or you say Paris and date, or Mumbai and date. Photograph doesn't carry it. It only carries the object. Do you follow? Not the knowledge at that time. Whereas in our case, it's not photographic. we will have knowledge, experience along with the object. Now I am your object, you are seeing me today. Now you also register scenario here that this is a Sunday Patanjali Sutra session in Pune. So all these things are registered in you. There is knowledge about me and him along with he as an object, I as object. You look at my form and then you say this is Prashant. You look at him and you say this is Srinit. That's an object. This is an object. But for memory we register both. The chitta registers the jnana as well as object. Not just the object, although we might remember object sometimes. Without the knowledge getting collected in the chitta, we will not have the memory, proper memory. That is why sometimes we have insufficient memory, and that's why we scratch our head. What is it actually? We remember something, but we don't remember vital thing. Or we remember something and we don't remember many other things, and we want to remember that too. That's why we scratch our head for a while. Jnana. So there is a component of jnana in smriti. They come together, they come hand in hand. It's combination of knowledge and recollection, knowledge and memory. So there is grahya-kara and grahana-kara. There is buddhi aspect. Buddhi plus smriti is the combination in smriti. It's an invariable concomitant. We need to sort that out, that this is knowledge aspect, this is memory aspect. In later part of memory management. And memory doesn't come erratically. He said svavyanjakanjana. That means it needs a manifesting cause. A smriti will not appear without a manifesting cause. Now if I ask you how many things are in your memory cortex, they are countless. But now being here, you'll remember only certain things here. Had you been at this point in time in Vaishali, Rupali, Amrapali for your breakfast, you would have remembered some other things. Is that right? Because you are here, relevant memories are only surfacing, and they would not have surfaced without the manifesting cause that you are in the institute, you are here for Patanjali Yoga Sutra session. Certain memories are surfacing. They need a manifesting cause. Svavyanjakanjaka karana. Svavyanjakanjana. Memory doesn't just appear on its own. It needs a manifesting cause. Now sometimes we feel, erratic memory might come to you. Now somebody might immediately remember here something in Delhi, something in Paris, something in Bangalore, something in Chennai. Irrelevant memory. You think it is irrelevant. For you it is irrelevant, but that is not true according to insights of the mystics. They say there is some kind of trigger to it, manifesting cause to the memory, when even if you feel it is erratic memory. It is memory out of place. I'll just give you a small example and I'll hand it over to him. Suppose you are in a grocer's shop and buying some grocery. You have brought a list from house and you are buying certain things according to the list. Now suddenly, out of blue, you remember Qutub Minar of Delhi. Now you think it is irrelevant memory. But there are so many factors which might be having relevance. Maybe you on the same day last year at same time you were at Qutub Minar. 2 years back, 3 years back at the same time, it happened to be Sunday, 10 o'clock, and then you were at Qutub Minar. Now, you don't have the reference in you, but the memory cortex has the reference. This is 10 o'clock, this is Sunday, this is 2 years back you were at Qutub Minar. Or you are doing your shopping and there is a person next to you, and this person Last time you were together, you don't remember the person, but you happened to be together at your New Delhi trip when you were at Qutub Minar. So maybe I do not know him now, I don't remember him. But it happened that way. I was a tourist to Delhi, he was a tourist to Delhi, he happened to be at Qutub Minar and I was also there at Qutub Minar. Now he has come next to me and he radiates something. Maybe he got memory of Qutub Minar, therefore I also get it, radiation from him. Memory is a very, very complex phenomenon, and we try to just, out of our reasoning, we say, hey, out of place, erratic. It is not erratic. It needs a manifesting cause. It needs a trigger. And that's why that word Svavyanjakanjana, Svavyanjaka means self-manifesting. Smriti has to manifest. And it needs a cause, a reason. We are not able to identify the reason. We are not able to imagine the reason out of our rationality also. And then we say this was erratic memory. It is not true. We are caught in vibrations of the world, spanda. There is a beautiful science comes in Kashmiri Shaivism called Spanda Shastra, and we are not aware of it. The vibrations, maybe this time of the, and it happened to be a Sunday, and this time, maybe 10 years back, I was somewhere and something has that vibration and it reaches me and memory comes up. The vibrations aspects are not at all, we are not familiar with it. We cannot even identify it. But there are so many vibrations. Now so many people are here, are coming from different parts of the country, different parts of the world. You are radiating different vibrations. They are all reaching both of us. We are not able to identify. Do you follow? So memory is such a thing. It's not just confined to one brain. All your brains are influencing our memories. You are radiating something from you, and they are all interfering with our brains, our vibrations. They interfere with our vibrations, and then something comes out, and we say it is erratic. So that is ruled out by the statement, it needs a Svavyanjakanjaka karana, Svavyanjakanjana, manifesting cause. And some people have this habit of looking into something, having a thought process in something, which others think is a very weird thought process. Or some people are sensitive to vibrations. Some people are not so sensitive to vibrations. So it is really very, very fascinating subject. It is more fascinating not because what you know about it. It is more fascinating when you come to know about what you do not know about it. Do you follow? Don't just look for fascination by what you know. Even if you reveal, I do know, I am not able to know this. There should be fascination for it. Human psyche cannot perceive so many things. And then when you realize that I cannot perceive it, I cannot know it, there should be fascination. Common man runs away from such things. Someone idle like me, I just embrace it. Otherwise, common man is busy in practical aspect of why bother about this? Let me do my business of life. Be practical minded. Someone like me who is idle in practical life, we go after it rather than they getting after me. Anyway, that's very fascinating. Fascination should depend upon what you do not know. While our all fascinations of worldly people is for what we know and what we are able to know and what we might know. Memory is such a thing. Most of the things will remain in the known of the unknown, in the realm of the unknown. That should fascinate you if you want to be a student of yoga. Don't be getting fascinated by what you are able to know, what you can know. But what you cannot know. Memory is such a thing. Anyway, much can be said about it. Memory is really something prolific aspect of inhuman psyche. In limited dimensions of the brain, there is unlimited memory is there of all your past, all our past lives, countless past lives. What the brain contains is incredible. And memory is one of those things which is really contained in our brain. All our past lives, memories, samskars are in our brain. Anyway, let me not further drown you in memory. You should be floating in memory. So okay, we can move further.
Yeah, so some of the points that are covered here by him, I'll sort of come back to them with some references after we have covered what Vyasa says. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and we'll come back to some of those points also. So where we were was, the knowledge imprint, the pratyaya, generates samskara. The samskara has two components, one about the original experience of the process of knowledge, the other about the object whose knowledge we had, the object being cognized. And then Vyasa said, during smriti, the object component is to be called smriti, the original process and knowledge component is to be called buddhi. Then he sort of continues describing and closes off there. So he says, Sacha dvai bhavita smartavya cha abhavita smartavya cha. So the memory can be of two types, as we know. It could be either something specifically produced in a waking state corresponding to some real cognition that happened in the past, or it could be about something imaginary like happening in the sleep or dream state. So it can be of both types. Then he covers the point that was mentioned some time back, that says sarvaha cha etaha smrtayaha pramana viparyaya vikalpa nidra smritinam anubhavat prabhavanti. So all of these smritis, all of the memories are coming because of a previous experience of the following types, which is all the five vrittis: pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smriti. So smriti itself can generate a smriti, because every vritti, including smriti, generates a samskara. The samskara can generate smriti. So it is very useful to understand the mechanism and the detail into which Vyasa has gone. That will help us understand certain lines of further Yoga Sutras, previous sutras, as well as some other texts like Bhagavad Gita. And we'll see how. Without this understanding, the way we understand those other statements can be quite superficial. Now that we have understood this, let's see how we can understand that in depth. Okay? Then Vyasa goes to a slightly separate point. He says, Sarvaha cha etaha vrittayaha sukha dukkha mohatmikaha. So now he is not talking about smriti in particular. Right? So because the whole vritti subsection is sort of ending here. This is the last of the vrittis. So Vyasa is saying all of these vrittis are sukha, dukkha, mohatmikaha. So the pleasure, pain, and what's usually called delusion. In some sense, it can be associated with sattva, raja, tama. Okay? Then he is saying this whole aspect will be dealt with later when we look at the kleshas, which comes in the second chapter, avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. And there you will see sukhanushayi ragaha, dukkhanushayi dveshaha, etc. So we won't go into details there, but if you remember, all of these vrittis are klishta, aklishta. All of these vrittis are sukha, dukkha, mohatmika, right? So the thing to bear in mind is that the vritti classification of the state of the chitta, the fivefold vrittis, is not the only possible classification. That is the chosen classification here, and there is the orthogonal aspect of sukha, dukkha, moha, klishta, klishta, which can also be applied to each of these. So the sukha, dukkha, moha, klishta, klishta are separate dimensions. The vritti is a separate dimension there. And all of these vrittis, etaha, sarvaha, vrittayaha, nirodhavyaha. So the nirodha, loosely translated as restraint, and we'll see why restraint may not be exactly the right word. But all of these vrittis, all of these types are to be restrained. Their nirodha needs to happen. Asam nirodhe, when the nirodha happens, samprajnato va samadhi bhavati asamprajnato va. So when the restraint happens, you either come to the samprajnata samadhi or the asamprajnata samadhi. And again, I'll talk a little bit about that, because there are some questions that may arise as to how can you have samprajnata and asamprajnata when all of those are restrained, and so on. So we'll look at that also. But here, so this is what Vyasa says in the context of this sutra. Now let me bring in some of the surrounding parts to sort of complete our understanding. So firstly, we said whenever there is any knowledge, I keep saying there is a pratyaya or a knowledge imprint on the chitta. So there is a very nice couple of lines in the Vakyapadiya, which is a grammar text, that says Atma Rupam Yatha Jnane Jneya Rupam Cha Drishyate Artha Rupam Tatha Shabde Swarupam Cha Prakashate. In that I'll tell you what the meaning is. But there, the Jnana analogy is used to explain word and meaning. Okay? But here our topic is the Jnana, so let's reverse the understanding. So what it's saying is, just like whenever there is any knowledge, okay, there are two aspects. There is a Atma Rupam, there is a knowledge itself, right? The knowledge's own form, and the Jneya Rupam, the thing whose knowledge it is, right? That form. So there is a combination. Similarly,
That is knowledge and your perception. Perception changes from person to person. I can show this mic and everyone sees this as a mic. The perception differs. Each one's. So Jnana and Gneya. Jnana is knowledge. Gneya is what is known. Okay? Knowledge is Jnana. Gneya is what is known. Object of Jnana, all of you, is Smriti now. But what each one is knowing is different. What each one is knowing is different. Knowledge, Jnana is Smriti, Vritti. A Gneya for each one will be changing. Okay?
okay, so there is a component of the knowledge happening, and the Jneya, the object whose knowledge it is. Okay? Atma Rupam Yatha Jnane Jneya Rupam Cha Drishyate Artha Rupam Tatha Shabde Swarupam Cha Prakashate. So when you take any shabda, any word, right, or sentence, shabda does not necessarily mean word. Actually, it is more the sentence in this context. But anything that has meaning, right? There is a artha, there is a meaning, and the shabda itself, its own form, right? So for us, let's reverse the analogy, because it's very easy for us to see that every word has its own form and there is a meaning, which is a totally different sort of dimension. Similarly, for any knowledge process, there is the knowledge and the object of knowledge, right? So in Smriti, it is relevant, or in general in Vrittis, it is relevant to understand the chitta mechanism of understanding, right? That there is the knowledge imprint and the reality whose knowledge it is, right? So that is one part. Then, in a later sutra in the same chapter, 43, we'll see Smruti Parishuddhau Swarupa Shunye Arthamatra Nirbhasa Nirvitarka. So let's not get into what it is completely, but let's look at the first term, Smruti Parishuddhi, okay, which means purifying or cleaning of the Smruti. Okay? If the translation, we just understand it superficially. Oh, there is some memory and it needs to be purified. But here, because we have understood the mechanism and Vyasa has explained it completely, we now know that the Smriti has two components, the knowledge process and the state of the chitta at the time, and the object itself, whose imprint had also come. And then we have to separate these two out. And when it is completely pure, then the object can shine in its own real state, yathartha jnanam, on the chitta. And that is Smriti Parishuddhi. And that is a very exalted state, which we'll see when we come to Samapatti and Samadhi. The point I want to make is, these terms which can be very quickly translated, but the depth of meaning, now we can understand, because we have seen what Vyasa has to say, we have seen what is the mechanism in the chitta that is occurring. Then we know what is Smriti Parishuddhi. Another point that he just made, in the 4th chapter, Kaivalya Pada, you will see, Jati Desha Kala Vyavahitanam Api Anantaryam Smriti samskarayoho ekarupatvat. So he said, memory is very mysterious. We don't know when it will get triggered. He gave very beautiful examples of how that can happen. Actually, Patanjali touches upon that in the 4th chapter. Okay, and now we understand why that happens, because we know how the vritti is generating the samskara, right? And when the samskara manifests, it is going to be of the same form as the vritti. Okay? So there is a fundamental precept in Sankhya Yoga that says nothing comes out of the blue. Everything is transformed from some source. It's called Shaktasya Shakya Karanat. Okay? So, however the original source or the cause was, the effect is going to be of the same nature. So when the samskara manifests, may be separated by time and space and everything, when the cause comes, it's going to manifest in the same form. Okay? So when we will, whenever we look at that 4th chapter and try to understand that sutra, this knowledge and background of Smriti that we have now is going to help us understand that. And that is where Smriti is coming, because it says Smriti samskarayoho ekarupatvat. The Smriti and the samskara have the same form. Okay. And then there is some Bhagavad Gita, okay, in the 2nd chapter. It says, Dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodopajayate. Okay, so it says, sort of the problems created due to attachment, okay, and the attraction to the objects of sensory objects, right? So it's saying when you keep on thinking about the sensory objects, it's going to create an attachment. The attachment is going to cause desire. Sangat sanjayate kamaha. Kamat krodopajayate. When desire, and if you don't get it, there is anger. Krodha is anger. Krodhat bhavati sammohaha. When the krodha comes, there is sammoha, delusion. Okay? Sammohat smriti vibhramaha. Okay? And so due to that delusion, there is smriti vibhramaha. And it's very quickly translated in a lot of texts, but if you look at the commentaries on Bhagavad Gita, right, what it is really saying is, like some of the commentaries describe this as the smriti, sort of the good smritis, or the valid knowledge coming from Upadesha, from your Acharya or your books or Vedas, whatever you have read. Those are to be manifested when their causes come. But that manifestation goes awry, that goes wrong, when you are in this state of desire and anger and so on. So all the good vrittis that were there, that were taking you to the path of yoga, if your chitta is colored by krodha and kama and so on, and sammohat smriti vibhramaha, and that is the smriti vibhramaha. So the samskara is there, it wants to manifest, it manifests in that form, but there is vibhrama happening because the chitta is not in a state that can absorb and effectively use that smriti. Okay? That is smriti vibhramaha. Then what happens? Smriti bhramshat buddhi nashaha. Right? So the buddhi or the intellect, the viveka aspect, what is right, what is wrong, that gets destroyed. Buddhi nashat pranashyati. So when the buddhi nasha happens, there is destruction of the person. Okay? And therefore, you have to stay away from thinking about sensory objects, because then there is a chain of effects, and now we understand it better than just saying, oh, the memory is corrupted. Right? What does that mean? We know what that means because we have understood the Vyasa Bhashya on this particular sutra. Okay?
See, Smriti Vibhrama, the term came here. It's like if your house is messed up, do you say, I am in a very comfortable state of mind, everything is fine? It's a bigger problem because you are not able to identify what is where if the house is messed up. So by this dhyayato vishayan pumsa, objects, attachment to objects, attachment, aversions, dualities, what happens is the memory gets totally displaced and messed up, like messed up house. Then when the memory is messed up, it's a very uncomfortable state to the mind. It is very agonizing state to the mind. And the memory is everything orderly kept, like a house is kept in well or very, very good order. You have no problem in moving in the house. You know what is where, what you can get from where, what lies where. But if the house is messed up, you have a problem. It's a torture to the mind, it's a torment to the mind, it's a vexation to the mind. So memory gets messed up. That is a big problem. And then it can end up in your self-annihilation. Memory getting messed up can buddhi nashat pranashyati. It can be giving you such a devastating end. And therefore the memory must be well managed, must be well stored, must be well set. This is the sign of a wise man. A wise man, why is his life smooth? You will never see a wise man tormented. If a person is tormented, that means there is lack of wisdom in the person. The world should not torment a man if person is wise. And why is it there is no tormentation? Because the memory is all properly set, placed, like well set house. House is not a problem. But messed up house is a big problem. Such a problem you cannot get out of the house because it is your house. You cannot stay in your house because it is messed up. Either way it is a problem. Being your house, you won't go away, go out of the house. You may go out for a couple of hours and you'll have to come back. And again face the mess. And staying in the house, it's also a problem because everything is a mess. That is Smriti Vibhrama, which takes place because of unyogic kind of conduct, attachment, aversions, having gravities on your mind, likes and dislikes, etc. So that's why you require a neutral mind for wisdom. When you have neutral condition of the mind, all the memory aspects are properly placed. They don't create a problem. But if you are in the gravities of attachment, aversions, likes and dislikes, and loaths and loves, then everything gets displaced, memory gets displaced, buddhi gets displaced, and you have the turbulence. So that's why yoga does the memory management by keeping the mind depolarized, neutralized. If it is polarized, then you have gravities pulling and pushing you. So best way to manage the memory is a yogic process. And if that memory is managed well, everything is in order. Mind is in order, emotion is in order, intellect in order. Every faculty will work in a proper way. And memory management is so important. And yoga is a way of memory management. Smriti Parishuddhau, as they refer to that Samapati topic sutra. Sorting out, things will be sorted out. You don't have to do the sorting, the things will get sorted out. See, suppose you have 10 children playing in the house. You can't have 10 children, your own children today. They cannot be 10. But then there are 10 children in the house, and then the parent of one child, parent enter, all children become orderly. Is that right? As long as the parents were not at home, the children are playing havoc in the house. The moment doorbell rings and somebody opens the door, and one of the parents of that house, they come in, all children become orderly. Yoga does that. Everything will be put in order.
Yeah. So while we are sort of the hour is over, if you don't mind, I'll continue because we are coming to the end of a subsection of vrittis. Okay, so while you are in that frame of mind, might as well finish it. Another sutra that tells us the position of Smriti, the importance of it for anyone going in the journey of yoga. So there is a sutra that says for Videhas and Prakriti Layas. So we'll see what that is. But those are different kinds of beings, right? The yogic thing comes automatically. But for Upaya Pratyaya, for people like us, humans and yogis, it is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvaka, Itaresham. So when the characteristics were chosen as key characteristics of the path towards yoga, you see that Smriti finds its place there. Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, Purvaka, Itaresham. Then a couple of other points. In the end, after discussing Smriti, Vyasa said that Etaha sarvaha vrittayaha nirodhavyaha. All of these vrittis, their nirodha should happen. They are to be restrained. So a question can arise that says, okay, if all of them are restrained, then that is asampragnata samadhi. But in sampragnata samadhi, we know that the chitta has some dhyaya vastu, right? Some object whose dhyana has happened, whose imprint is there in the chitta, and whose yathartha jnanam is happening in the chitta, right? Then how can we say that all the vrittis are to be restrained? Because there has to be pratyaksha of some vastu in the chitta, right? So the way to answer that is the pratyaksha or the sakshatkara in the sampragnata samadhi is not the pramana vritti, it is not a pratyaksha vritti, because all the vrittis are sukha, dukkha, mohatmika. The pratyaksha in the time of samadhi is not sukha, dukkha, mohatmika. It is not laukika pratyaksha, it is not the worldly pratyaksha, it is called alaukika sakshatkara. Okay? So in some sense, it is otherworldly sakshatkara that is coming in. It is not sukha, dukkha, mohatmika. And the pratyaksha was defined as indriya pranalikaya, through the sensory mechanism right up to the chitta. Right? In samadhi, that is not happening. It is not coming through the sensory mechanism right up to the chitta. So the sampragnata samadhi also, all the vrittis are to be restrained. That statement holds good both for sampragnata and asampragnata. However, the final forms are different. Okay? But neither of them are caused due to the laukika vrittis, the fivefold vrittis that was discussed here. So that is a point of clarification, since we are towards at the end of the vritti subsection. Another point I just wanted to make was these seem to be very sort of complicated technical topics. Okay, why is it relevant when we are doing our yoga practice? Why do we need to know about all these details of the chitta and samskara and so on? Now, firstly, of course, we want to understand the quest for understanding, that is the original text and so on. But probably you are seeing that this kind of just understanding the thought process of Vyasa and Patanjali and so on is refining our own mind and intellect. Right? So the whole fabric of us as a listener, as the person who is understanding, is slowly getting transformed when we are spending time. And all of that is slowly cooking in sort of our chitta. Those samskaras are getting on to the chitta, right? So there is value in sort of going through rigorous thought and taking the pains to do this, even if the aim is general yogic practice and improvement of asanas and so on. And there is this Sanskrit saying that says, Vidvaneva vijanati vidvajjana parishramam. Okay? So the parishrama, the labor of the vidwan, or people who are trying to understand, wise people, can be understood only by another wise person.
Wise people can only understand the struggle of the wise people.
So it is worthwhile sort of spending the time, even if it may seem as though, these are technicalities and why should we bother about these things. And
okay, finally about this memory, see how permeating, subsuming it is. We are speaking in English, and you say you understand English. What is that understanding? What is that understanding? You understand this language that we are speaking because we are speaking the language that you understand. English is the language. How do you understand? We are using words for our communications, and you say you are knowing this because you know the meanings of the words. Is that right? You say you know the meanings of the word that we are using. you really don't know the meanings. You remember the meanings. You don't know the words. You do not know the words. You remember the meanings of the words. So it's all memory by which you are able to comprehend whatever you are comprehending. And you say, I know it. Now I am knowing this. I got to know this. What was the substrate for you to know whatever you got to know? Memory. We do not know the words and we do not know the meanings of the words. They are not our revelations. We remember the meanings of the words. If you say that you know the meanings of the words, that means you are revealed as a grammarian, you must be a philologist. Each one is not a philologist, each one is not a lexicographer. We do not know the meanings of the words. We remember the meanings of the words, and if we don't have memory, even if you know English, you will not understand damn word here. Do you understand? So when we know a language, we remember the meanings of the words, and that's why we know the language. If we did not have the remembrance, we would not have understood any language. Memory is so much permeating our faculties, subsuming our faculties. We turn a blind eye and we complain. Many of you complain, I don't have good memory. This is really unjustifiable complaint. I have got a very poor memory, very bad memory. If you know one language, understand how much memory is loaded. The words and their meanings, they are all in memory. No word is being revealed by us. We are not realizing the words, and their meanings are not revelations. They are our remembrances, not revelations. Memory is so much bountiful, and yet we complain about it. This is truly unjustifiable. Never ever complain hereafter. I have a bad memory. It's a relative term. Maybe somebody has better memory and you don't have so much of memory, but don't say, I have a very bad memory, I don't have memory. You understand a language, at least one language. It's all memory. Okay?
Okay, so now with this background, let us look at what Guruji said about memory. Again, in his usual simplified, very brief statement, he says, memory, when correctly used, it is the foundation of practice of discrimination, okay, which captures the Smriti process and the Smriti Parishuddhi. Okay? And he's saying that is the importance of memory. Also, in the context of this sutra, because it is the last of the 5 vrittis being discussed, Guruji draws an interesting correspondence between the Chitta Bhumis and the fivefold vrittis. Okay? I'll just mention that here because it is more of a food for thought. So he says, for the Muda Chitta Bhumi corresponds. So he's not saying Muda means Nidra. But if you were to line up the 5 Chitta Bhumis and the 5 vrittis, you might observe some correspondence, and then let us think about how it might correspond. For Muda it is Nidra, for Kshipta Viparyaya, for Vikshipta Vikalpa, for Ekagra Smriti, and for Niruddha Pramana. Okay, so it's not like this means that. There can be a rough correspondence being drawn, which can be very illuminating. And now that we understand what all of these mean, we can think about what it is. Okay.
So finally, we get a hollow advice. Don't remain in present. Don't go to past. Always try to be in present. Don't go to past. This is a hollow advice. Hollow advice. Meaningless. If you are not going to past, that means you don't have any memory. If you have no memory, you will be packed up to mental hospital. It is not really possible to isolate ourselves from past. Because memory always pertains to past. Memory doesn't pertain to future. I don't say, I remembered what happened in 2022. No, not possible. Something retrospectively. So it's a hollow advice. A student of Darshan Shastra will be very critical about such word, which gives you hollow idealism. Never ever go to past. Be all the time in present. You really cannot divorce yourself from the past. If you divorce yourself from the past, you will be packed up to a mental hospital. That's not a sane condition. That's not sanity at all. You cannot really be separate from memory, and memory is all past. Memory is totally subsuming our life. No part of our cell, say from genetic memory, so many memories are really haunting our embodiment. As I said, grandfather on your nose, grandfather in your eyes, and etc., etc. Memory is, and whatever you eat, it becomes you. Body is programmed. We are genetically programmed. So many programs are there. So that means something from the past is really getting inserted like a software in us. So you really cannot banish the past from you. And to stay that you must be all the time in present, it's all hollow idealism. Because you are totally subsumed by memory. And that's something of the past. Therefore, it requires a management. You can't get rid of it. You are all memory. You are all past. Present is just a moment. It will go and it will come and go. The future is invading you every moment. The past is not leaving you at all. Therefore, we need the management of the memory. And even the ultimate salvation point, it is again one memory. Memory will not leave you even after liberation. Upanishadic there is a statement. Once you get that memory, inverted commas, you are liberated. Shruti lambe vipramokshaha. Vidyate hriday granthi chidyate sarva saushya. That's the process of liberation. So one memory is required. And that one memory is your liberation. If that memory is also gone, then liberation is not there. Final last memory, and that is eternal memory for a liberated one. Memory doesn't even leave while you are liberated or when you are in salvation. But that's the transcendent memory. Memory doesn't leave you, whether you are in bondage or when you are liberated. Antima Kalina Smriti, Bhagavad Gita. There's a lot of mysticism in memory. That is going to give you liberation. Antima Kalina Smriti, last moment, a particular specific memory is going to emancipate you. So what remains in liberation with us is only one final, ultimate memory. Such is its permeation, pervasion. Beware, you have touched on a very, very mysterious subject matter. Now you have no escape. You have entered, you have taken a jump into the ocean, and now you will have to face the ocean. Thank you.
So let's recite the shlokas on Guruji. And after that, those who want to leave can leave. If there are any questions, we'll stay back for a few minutes. Vaijñānika shikshakatve kalākāra āsaneshu yaha yogābhyāse ca tatvajñas tam vande sundaram gurum yoga vruksho lokesmin vardhito yasya preranaya योगाचार्याय गुरवे सुंदराय नमो नमः. Thank you. Okay, so any questions?
Sir, in memory management, is there any reference to selective memory? Is there any reference to selective memory in memory management?
See, again, as I said, memory is a huge thing. Memory needs impressions. If you do not have impressions, the memories will not be there. Now, you can have selective memories voluntarily or then involuntarily. Because sometimes the memory doesn't leave you. If you want, when you say, I want to forget this, I want to forget this, I want to forget this, you are embracing it. So, if you want to have selective memory, that means you must sort out, you must say, I don't want to have these memories. When they come, discourage them. Discourage the thought process. If you go on discouraging, then that memory will be keeping away from you. But if you go on saying, I don't want this memory, I want to leave this memory, this should go away, I want to drive it, it will not go away. So, selective memory can be in your hands, like those who are very good students academically, they work on mnemonics and they will make a provision to remember what they should remember for examination, and there is a scheme to develop that. Ask any student, a brilliant student, how does he stand out? He does something for his memory to be preserved, memory to be staying with him, memory to becoming handy. Remember, because otherwise you go to enter the examination hall and you forget all the things. This can happen. But that's not the case of a brilliant student. He gets a tiny memory. The memory will flow into him as he starts writing the answer paper. So you can work for such a selective memory, or when you do not do management, then you will be troubled by selective memories. You will have memories you don't want, and you will not have memories of what you want. Memories that you want will go away from you, and memories you don't want will infiltrate at wrong point in time. So that's mismanagement. So management of the memory has to be understood, and you have to develop the more ways and means so that selective memory that you want can be with you. Selective memory that is troubling you can be kept away. Of course, so that's the memory management. So many things have to be done for memory management. And memory in the brain locus can be managed. Memory in the heart locus can be managed. Memory in metapsychical aspects cannot be managed, because anything will enter the impression cortex. Anything will enter the impression cortex. It will take all impressions. Many impressions will not stay with you now. They will only manifest when the manifesting cause appears. So many things you will forget now. Now you will, after you depart from here, half an hour put a question, what do I remember about this? Most of the things will have gone. They will not have gone from impression cortex, they will surface whenever manifesting cause will be there. So that's a bounty we have. We may not register so many things, but many things all the things are registered. All the things are registered. We must be very careful about our conduct of life. Whom to meet and whom not to meet, where to go, where not to go. We must be selective there. If you go to casino, it's going to register some impressions and it's going to give you problems sometimes. When you are spiritually evolved also, it will create a problem. That's why there is achara. Don't go here, don't go there, do this, don't do this. Because impression cortex is all the time open. It is open to receive all impressions that will fall on it. So, management of life, conduct of life is so important. But there are two aspects of selective memory. One is voluntary, one is involuntary. Voluntary, you can have a scheme for it, and involuntary can be a vexation, tormentation for you. What you don't want will be coming to your mind often. As if that's a selective memory. Wherever you go, you remember it. Infatuation. If you have infatuation for something, even if you enter a temple shrine, sanctum sanctorum, that memory will come there. And that's why we must be careful about the infatuation. Sattva Raja Tama Guna management is so important, so that the sorting out will take place.
So that just reminds me of, there is a shloka in the Gita where Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sannivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So he says the smriti is, I am in the heart of each person, hridi sannivishto. Matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So smriti is coming from me. Jnana is coming from me. Apohanam also. Apohanam, in one sense it is reasoning, but in the other sense it's also the fading away of the memory and the jnana. So all of that is coming from me. That is what Krishna is saying, which sort of brings in the mystic and mysterious aspect of this.
So when he is inside the heart, he is a condition, he is sometimes went to sleep. Divinity will never go to sleep. Ever awake. Everything will be gathered by it. Another example is a mirror. Can you have a mirror which is not reflecting at all? Any moment? Even if you wrap the mirror, it will reflect the wrapper. If you apply tar on the mirror, it will reflect the tar. Mirror will never cease to reflect at all. Similarly, this impression cortex, it will receive every single thing that you do in life, face in life. Therefore, life management is very important. Conduct of life, management of life is very important. Otherwise, it's open all the time. The mirror is going to give reflection any point in time. It will catch reflection. Nothing can escape from mirror. Having come in front of the mirror, mirror will catch it. Similar is our psyche, chitta. And the samskar aspect of the chitta. Everything will get registered. That's why you should be very careful. That's why we have got this philosophy of conduct of life. Achara, vichara, ahara, vihara, achara, vichara, etc. You must be having a proper scheme, because it is all the time open. It will take anything that it comes in front of it, like the case of mirror. If you want to avoid reflection, don't be coming in the vicinity of the mirror. Try to be behind the mirror, you will not be reflected. But if you are in a corner, mirror will reflect. Chitta is like that. Be careful, be aware of it.
There was another question. Only take just one more.
When the manifesting cause comes and arises, I'll just call that the original memory. When in the present moment the process of discrimination happens and you begin to absorb yourself in that memory or work with that memory, it is going to be restored as a new memory, in the sense that it won't go back to an original memory. So my question is, when Guruji's gave his commentary, that is the aspect that I understand as the abhyasa and vairagya, where you are using memory to actually go toward, for lack of a better word, a pure memory, or the memory of liberation, like you were saying, that it's a process of going toward a pure memory.
Yeah, that's the aspect of memory management, memory purification, sorting out. That's why many times Guruji used to say, that was yesterday. That means he implied you should forget that. Because otherwise it will interfere with today's new knowledge that he was trying to give. That's why I said that was yesterday, forget yesterday. Because our knowledge is going to interfere. If you recall earlier part, I said the knowledge and object both are remembered. If you want to evolve, see, when you want to climb up upper step, you can't say, I am not remove my foot from the lower step. You have to remove the foot from the lower step to climb up the next step. Similar in the process of knowledge, you will have to be on an escalator and you have to disembark from a lower plane, earlier plane. You can't say, I will not remove the foot from there and I will climb up. How much can you climb up? One foot stuck to a step and the other foot going second step, third step, fourth step. How much can you go? So that's an aspect of purification of memory, sorting out of memory. So suppose a bad memory is coming to surface, one of the processes of Adhyatmic instruction is that disengage yourself from that location, from that scenario, go somewhere else. If the memory is tormenting you there, you see that you have to disengage yourself, go away, get away. Otherwise you will keep on encouraging that same memory and it will create problem. It will go on building up. Memory goes to memory as well, cortex. And that's why you should be careful about handling memory. So suppose you have a bad memory haunting you, you can go to movie also. Go to a movie. The movie will give you another bad memory again. But you will get rid from this memory. You leave that place the moment you are vexed. That means you should know there is a vibration which is hitting me here of this memory. Get away from that spot. Go away, walk out. That's very important. There are so many aspects of memory management. Since it is so complex and so fathomless, the measures are also similarly of so many kinds.
Okay, so let's keep it quick now.
Yeah. Hello. My question is, generally speaking, how much time does it take for imagination to turn into a reality? And what is imagination? Because I don't want to be lost in thoughts like, how long does it take for imagination to turn into reality? Because I'm done imagining. I want the reality now.
It depends upon what you are imagining. See, suppose I imagine I'm 95 years old, I will have to wait for those 15-20 years to become 95. So what you imagine will decide when it will fructify, when it will actualize, etc. So if your imagination is more realistic and in the time span also it can happen, it will take that much time, but then the time span is required too much for something to actualize. Like the mother to deliver the baby will take 9 months after she has conceived. So she has to wait for 9 months anyway. So what is imagination? I want to become mother imagining, a woman imagining. It will take time. When are you getting conceived? And after having got conceived, yet you have to wait for 9 months. So what you imagine will decide when it will actualize and where it will actualize, because it also needs a time and space. You have to be in that time and space for them to actualize. So if the time and space is very distant, remote, it is going to take longer time. If it's not remote, then perhaps it can take in a shorter time. So what you imagine, what is your imagination, will decide whether it will be realized or not, and when it will be realized or not. The time aspect of its realization will depend upon your imagination. I want to live 100 years. I will have to wait for another 30 years to get to 100. I can't say, let me get those 100 years in 15 years. No, I am only 70. I will have to wait for 30 years. So imagination and actualization have that relationship, and the conditioning aspects are there.
My question relates to, we've been talking about sight, but in yesterday's class we spoke about music, audio, similarly taste, take your tongue away from teeth. Is there a hierarchy of senses in memory? Is there any sort of skill there?
Question repeat. Okay, so the question is whether there is a hierarchy of senses in memory, right? Based on sight, sound, taste, and so on.
Yeah, the memory always depends upon object. You see, how much an object impresses you is also important. Something is very impressive, you will develop the memory rapidly. Something is not impressive, it will take longer time. Similarly, the memory of the five senses, because these five objects are different. Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. There are certain objects which need contact with the sense, otherwise they will not give you perception. Vision is something that I can see something at a distance also, but I want to taste a delicacy, it must touch the tongue. It must touch the tongue, then only I will get the taste or the touch. I cannot feel how that thing is rough, which is at a distance. It must touch my tactile organ. So that's a classification called prapyakari, aprapyakari in one of the philosophical systems. That is, the object are of such nature, such objects, some objects can be at distance and you can feel. Smell can come from a distance. Vision can be coming from a distance. But tactile perception must have the contact with the tactile organ, or the gustatory perception must have contact with the gustatory organ. So similarly is the case of the knowledge that they generate. Impressive knowledge of smell will stay longer, and the memory will come often. Something not very impressive, say aroma in kitchen, not so impressive, memory may not be coming, or it will come with a greater duration of time there. But exquisite aroma, you will perhaps never forget in lifetime. How that the objects are impressing you, how the knowledge is impressing you is important for memory to actualize, memory to formulate, and memory to manifest. Impressive things you remember quickly, unimpressive things you don't remember. Object, similarly, impressive object, impressive experience. This will decide the time of duration of memory.
So we'll stop here today. We can continue next time. Thank you.